Hello everyone, my name is Ryan Clayton, and on today's special edition of Hall Pro, my panel and I will be discussing the NBA, specifically the jam-packed trade deadline that just occurred. We will be walking you through the biggest trades and what it means for the teams involved, as well as looking at the season thus far, and finally, our predictions for the finals. You expect all this and more on this special edition of Hall Pro on the NBA trade deadline. Welcome back, everyone. Again, my name is Ryan Clayton. It's time to introduce my panel. We got Christian Gardner and Ronny Castaneda. Fellas, how are we doing?
I'm doing fantastic. This was a crazy trade deadline, and man, there's so many moves, and it's always crazy in the NBA, man.
This is a historic trade deadline. I'll bring up some numbers later on, but hey, I'm among two of the best we got here. Happy to talk some NBA basketball, man.
Well, very good, fellas. Before we get into trade deadlines, there are some things to talk about. This has been one of the most unique seasons we've ever seen. So if you just had to pick one, what do you think has been the biggest storyline this season?
I think for me, man, it's got to be the recent news of all these great injuries. LeBron James being out for quite some time, and also the young kid LaMelo Ball. What he's been able to do down in Charlotte was must-see TV, and it's so sorry to see him out for the rest of the season, man.
For me, I think it's the magnitude of the James Harden trade for the Brooklyn Nets. First off, James Harden's turned into an MVP candidate this season for the Brooklyn Nets. That's been tremendous for them. Reason why they're finals, favorites right now. Going after that, the Rockets only got a few games of Victor Oladipo after he was traded. We're going to talk about that much later. I think that's a crazy situation down in Houston. Jared Allen has been succeeding over in Cleveland. He's going to be there for the long term. And then finally, Karis LeVert. If he doesn't get traded, he doesn't get an MRI. No one finds out about the cancerous mass on his kidney. He comes back, now he's balling. Hit a game winner, I think, 2 games ago. So crazy stuff from that trade. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, I think those are great headlines to be talking about. What I want to next go into is talking about a team and player that has been both overperforming and underperforming. Who do you guys have for that?
I think for me, when you're talking about a team that's overperforming, you have to talk about the New York Knicks. And what Julius Randle has been able to do, leading this very, very young squad. I mean, they're one of the best in the league right now. And Julius Randle, a deserved all-star player. This is a player that can drop 30 buckets a night and just completely flow everything scoring, and also leading this defensive attack of the Knicks that is one of the best in the entire league right now. And, I mean, R.J. Barrett, what he's been able to do, he's on his way to becoming one of the best defenders in this league alone. And for my underperforming players, I'm going to have to go to my native Washington, Davis Bertans. He got this huge contract because what he can do as the Latvian laser. He can absolutely shoot it from anywhere on the court, and it just wasn't there at the beginning of the season. This was a player that you get used to shooting around above 40% from behind the arc, and he was below 30 points during this season. So definitely that $80 million contract was a bit of a hurting moment for them.
Yeah. For my teams, I'm going to go with CP3 and the Phoenix Suns. When I first heard that CP3 had gotten traded to the Suns, I had no doubt they were going to go to the playoffs. Did I think they'd be a top 5 team in the entire league? Never in a million years. So the job he's been doing has been tremendous, not only on his own part, but also developing Devin Booker. Let's face it, CP3 is not going to be here for too long. So Devin Booker will soon have to retake the reins over in Phoenix. And I think the experience he's getting playing alongside CP3 is going to be so beneficial for him. So I think it's a great move for the Suns. CP3, keep balling because we're all big fans of it. My most underperforming team is going to have to go with the Timberwolves. Listen, I'm a big D'Angelo Russell fan. The fact that him, Karl Anthony Towns, and the number 1 overall pick in Anthony Edwards have only combined for 10 wins. Granted, let's talk about the injuries to D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns have not been the best. But I just think when those guys are on the floor together, they should be one of the deadliest trios in the league. And we haven't been able to see that so far. So in my honest opinion, I really think next year, depending on what Timberwolves do with the draft, for all we know, Minnesota could be dreaming of Cade Cunningham right now and looking to move D'Angelo Russell. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next year in Minnesota, but this year has been a big disappointment.
Definitely has, Ronnie. For my picks, personally, a team or a player that has been overperforming, I've been really impressed with, is Demar Derozan. I have loved his role with the Spurs. He's kind of just a, passing first guard now who is taking less shots, which is great to see that he's able to evolve into something good. Overperforming team has definitely been the Hornets. At the time of this recording, sitting fourth. I think that's incredible. We've seen great play from LaMelo Ball as well as Gordon Hayward. And as for a team that's underperforming, I personally would say the Bulls. I thought they were going to be probably in that next tier of teams in the East, but as of right now, they are 10th and fighting for some spots. But they did pick up a good player with the trade deadline, which is where we are going to next, the main focus of the show. And before we talk about the actual trades, let's talk about two players that did not get traded that were assumed to be traded. That is going to be Kyle Lowry and John Collins. So what were your guys' thoughts about them not getting traded?
I think even Kyle Lowry thought he was out of Toronto. He chucked the deuces up in the last game. He was ready to go. And I really thought he was on his way to either Philly or the Lakers. And I think Philadelphia even thought that as well. I think at around noon or so, they believed that they were on the 1 yard line if they were about to cash in on this trade. And, of course, it doesn't fall through. And for the Lakers, of course, they're always trying to acquire different stars. But, hey, T.J. Horton-Tucker, he's a valuable member to that team, and that's why he's not in Toronto, and Kyle Lowry's not going to L.A.
Yeah, taking a look at Kyle Lowry, more in depth, I think it's really crazy what the Raptors were doing. They were playing it along like they were willing to trade him, but I don't know how you could be willing to trade a guy like Kyle Lowry and ask from Philadelphia for guys like Tyrese Maxey and Matisse Thybulle. It's like, do you not want this team to trade with you? Like, what kind of business is that? So, obviously, I think Kyle Lowry belongs in Toronto. I mean, I think I could speak for all of us in saying I can't imagine him on any other team. So that's definitely interesting. In terms of John Collins, I think John Collins staying put in Atlanta is a perfect thing. I think it'll help out a lot with Trae Young, who's tremendous on the pick and roll. When you have a big man like John Collins, I think it's something to help him out. And it's not like they were going to get another big out there. Maybe they could have gone Daniel Theis. Are you going to tell me Daniel Theis is better than John Collins? I don't think so. So I firmly believe that him staying in Atlanta is going to be huge, not only for himself, but for Trae Young, who's still developing into his NBA role.
Yeah, I think great points about both players. So next, I want to talk about a trade that kind of went under the radar. Wasn't necessarily a blockbuster trade, but a trade that you really liked nonetheless.
Guys, for me, I think the biggest underrated trade, P.J. Tucker to Milwaukee. I think that completely changes what they're doing up there in Milwaukee. That defensive front, P.J. Tucker, has been one of the best in the league. And when you're pairing him with a Defensive Player of the Year and MVP, Giannis Antetokounmpo, wow, look out. Those bigs will be crazy in Milwaukee.
Yeah, definitely a lot of movement in the East, and that's where I'm going to keep it from my point. I think George Hill to Philadelphia is a very underrated trade. Here's why. Ben Simmons, he's not the most offensively skilled player, and we know that. He's only good when it comes to driving to the bucket. We've all seen the memes about his three-point shooting. We don't need to talk more about that. He's in contention for Defensive Player of the Year. Then you add George Hill, who's one of the best three-point shooters in the league, making him one of the best scoring point guards in the league. So you give Philadelphia now that 1-2 punch. If you need scoring from your point guard, you put in George Hill. You want some defense? You got Ben Simmons. I think that's such a great move. Let's talk about those two moves in general. It's now because, the magnitude that the Nets are bringing. Each team now has to get ready for that potential playoff, series. So, the East teams, they did their job. It's going to be fun watching, come April, June, and everything.
And thinking about how Philly lost out on getting Kyle Lowry to pick up George Hill, huge, great point guard to pick up.
Yeah, the Kyle Lowry thing was interesting because they kind of called Toronto's bluff, it seemed like, because Toronto was asking for a lot, and then Philadelphia said, we'll just get our own point guard. We're not going to deal with you. So probably the biggest, team that was involved in the trade deadline was the Orlando Magic and the clearance sale that they had. There's a lot of areas we can go into, but what was your thoughts as all these trades were coming out of Orlando?
Completely clearing house in Orlando. And Vucevic to Chicago, wow, I think that's going to be something stellar. But Aaron Gordon, they've been talking about trying to trade Aaron Gordon for years, and finally getting it done, getting it to Denver, and picking up a very good young player in R.J. Hampton and Gary Harris and a first. Nicely done, and you picked up a couple more picks with Vucevic as well. You could have got a little bit more from Fournier, but hey, still a solid outing here at the trade deadline for Orlando.
Yeah, and I think the most important part about this is the fact that Orlando is still keeping their young centerpieces, I guess you can call it. So Markelle Fultz is going to remain on the team. Jonathan Isaac, once he gets fully healthy, he's going to be back in balling. So I think that's a great move in the sense because now you get a true rebuild. Now you get to start from the ground up. You get to draft players who are close to the age range of your two stars, I guess if you want to call them now. Not to mention they still got Cole Anthony. So they can add on to that. So I think Orlando is finally doing something that should have been done a long time ago. Better late than never. It's a true rebuild going on for the Magic right now.
Yeah, I agree with all of those points. Christian already got into it, so I do want to hear from you, Ronnie. Which team do you feel like, outside of Orlando, that they traded with, which team do you think benefited most from this cleaning of the house?
I'm going to go out and say Denver. Denver got a big guard, can play the forward sometimes, and Aaron Gordon to help him for the playoff push. Obviously, early in the season, Denver saw some struggles, but now they've got Nikola Jokic, who is working his way up to be the front runner for the MVP award now that Joel Embiid is injured. So, yeah, I think Denver got a great player to help them in this playoff push. They got to the Western Conference Finals last year. It's going to be interesting to see how they get farther now. They might have lost a little bit of depth, but I still think the addition of Aaron Gordon is a huge one for them.
Yeah, I do kind of agree with that. I think that keeping Bol as well as Michael Porter Jr. was huge for them at the deadline, and also so much scoring that they can continue to do as well.
So the final thing I want to talk about with Orlando is, did they get enough back for all these players that they traded?
I think you got a couple picks. Gary Harris is a very good player. He's going to be a starter for them for quite some time. And R.J. Hampton, see how he develops. It really depends on how they can continue to hit on these picks. And for me, we'll see what happens. They've done well in picking up a lot of good young players. You talk about Cole Anthony. I think he can be a very good player in this league.
I'll go right off with you on that, Christian. I think the picks are the most important part. Because like I said, you already got your young guys. You got to build from the ground up. How do you do that? With the draft. It doesn't hurt when you add a lot more, talent that's younger than them and hope to build that up. So I think, like you said, it's got to be hit or miss on the picks in the upcoming draft. So that's the most important part for them.
It'll be very interesting to see what the future is in Orlando. We're going to be moving on to another Florida team that benefited from the trade deadline. That, of course, is the Houston Rockets trading away Oladipo to the Miami Heat. First off, we're talking about this trade. How do you like the fit with Oladipo with the Miami Heat roster?
I think it's a solid one. You see this Miami team as a very scrappy team, and Oladipo has made himself into one of the best defenders in the league. And so I think that will be huge for them moving forward, as he's quite a lockdown defender. And I'll see how it continues for that scoring. Jimmy Butler, he's one of the best in the league. And Tyler Hero, as he continues to grow, how does that eat into his minutes with Victor Oladipo on this team?
I'll go along with that. I think you add a sharpshooter and defensive player like Victor Oladipo. That's obviously a great and tremendous move. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, if every other team in the East should be very scared right now, because I think the team that improved the most is the Heat. I mean, when you add a player like that, that's tremendous for them. Like you said, Jimmy Butler takes a load off of him and Bam Adebayo. And when you mix that with the fact that they were able to keep Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero, two of the best three-point shooters in the league, or up-and-coming three-point shooters in the league, that's a really scary point. Then they got Andre Iguodala, not to mention a fourth piece to the puzzle might be coming should LaMarcus Aldridge sign with them. But that's for a later time. We don't know what that decision is going to be like. But yeah, Miami has made some moves, and I think it's to make up for the fact that they didn't make any moves in this offseason. So they made a pretty big one right now.
Yeah, and keeping those key pieces you talked about was, again, a aftershock of Lowry not getting traded. They could not find that right deal with Toronto, and so they struck another deal. So overall, the Rockets really did not get a lot back with Oladipo. Why do you think that is? He does have a history of injuries, but why do you think they were so lowballed and agreed to it on the Rockets' end?
Truthfully, I think Houston just panicked. They made this huge trade with James Harden, and you could have had Caris LeVert, but they went and got Oladipo, and it just didn't work out for them. And not getting a huge amount of picks, not getting a huge haul or young players with that. Avery Bradley, he's a great player, always been a great defender, but it's just one that they, at the midnight hour, felt like they had to continue to change what they thought on this outlook for this team, and had to make a move with Oladipo's contract expiring.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Maybe a little bit of panic, maybe more or less Victor Oladipo might have lost a little bit of stock like you talked about. His injuries and everything of the sort. He hasn't, really shown he's able to just overcome a lot of those injuries. So I think that's a scary part that comes to it. But Miami also has not been the best, ran team when it comes to, picking up free agents. Obviously, the Jimmy Butler thing was a steal. Let's not forget about that. But I remember seeing, reports that Pat Riley was willing to give up 2 or 3 players just for one player. Now, like I said, I'm not a math major, but I don't really do none of that. I'm more willing to give up picks instead of giving up players in that magnitude. So maybe it's a little bit of both, but nonetheless, they got rid of the problem. They do have a lot of picks. Let's not forget the 9 picks they got from that James Harden trade. That's going to be a lot that they can use to their future. And I think Houston is now in a position that, Orlando is right now, and that they're going to try and build and start from the way up. They got Christian Wood, who's a great up-and-coming player. So maybe they can build around him, help him out, as well as helping whoever they draft in Houston.
Final segment to wrap up the trade deadline is overall, who are the biggest winners and losers coming out of this trade deadline?
I think for me, I'll just go with the guys right here on the board. I'm going to go with the Denver Nuggets. You talked about them a lot. Not giving away a lot of those young players, as special players like Michael Porter Jr. and Bol, and getting back a possible all-star in Aaron Gordon. I think they're going to be putting up a lot of points out there in the West. And for my losers, I'm still going to go with the board. I do not really understand this Rajon Rondo trade for the Clippers. I think giving up Lou Will, he's been one of the best players in the league. I don't know if that was the right move right now.
For me, my winners are going to be the Miami Heat. I think, like I said, it was like a perfect piece to the puzzle. Takes a load off of Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, and you get a great score. Not to mention they could get a 4th piece coming soon. Like I said, LaMarcus Aldridge, we were going to have to wait on that. My losers are the Portland Trailblazers. Here's why. Damian Lillard is having an MVP caliber season like he does every season. It just goes under the radar. But they got rid of Gary Trent. The biggest issue with the Trailblazers has been, what are we going to do with C.J. McCollum? C.J. McCollum's trade stock was at its highest this season. And instead, you trade the younger Gary Trent? In my opinion, I think you could have switched out Gary Trent for switched out C.J. McCollum for Gary Trent, and he would have been able to do the same exact job. So I think that's a tremendous, falter from the Trailblazers. But hey, CJ and Dame, I guess it must be a match made in heaven for them. They must love playing with each other. But I am excited to see how Gary Trent pans out in Toronto because he's a great baller.
Hello there, I'm here with Christian Gardner, who did a fantastic interview with Seton Hall's very own Dr. Grantham. Christian, do you want to talk a little bit about that interview?
Yeah, Professor Grantham, I had him in professional sports franchises. He was a chief executive at the NBA PA for many, many years, and also was a big-time agent. As if you're a big Knicks fan, he brought Amari Stoudemire right here to play for your New York Knicks. So he's been deep into the NBA for years and years, so we had to talk to him about his experience with the trade deadline and give us a little more insight on what happens behind the closed doors. I'm Christian Gardner. I'm alongside Professor Charles Grantham here at Seton Hall University, sports management professor. But even more than that, he comes to us working within the NBA for quite some time, along with being executive for the NBA PA, and as well as being a consultant for some of your favorite players, as well being an agent. So, Professor Grantham, thank you so much for being on with me.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
So let's just jump right into this. You have years of experience within the NBA, and you've seen a lot of trade deadlines come and go. So what are kind of the conversations that fans might be missing behind the scenes between teams and agents as well?
Well, first of all, you have to start out with the understanding that while everybody's on the chase here to win a championship, and also given the pandemic year, there's a lot of money that's been lost by teams and also by players as a result of the canceled season last year and sort of the restricted one this year. So always got to keep in mind it's the business of the sport that's really at hand here. And those who own teams are looking to maximize revenue and minimize their costs. So when trade deadline comes up, you're also looking again to think about winning an NBA championship and what it may take to get there. And are you close? Are you within the framework of a playoff hunt? Are you vying for a key playoff spot? Are you vying for the Eastern or Western championship? I mean, all those are factors. And at the same time, you're looking at your payroll, and you're looking at how players are performing. You're looking at the amount of guaranteed money that you are committed to. And at the same time, you're wondering if, in fact, there's some last minute moves that you can make. Now, if you're representing players on the other side, you're conscious of the fact that your player could be a restricted free agent. He could be an unrestricted free agent. He could be looking to extend his contract. He could see that he's a valuable asset for the respective teams and would not like to move. But the primary thing here is, where do I fit? And if I'm a restricted or unrestricted free agent, because if I'm an unrestricted free agent, unless I am really going to be part of the plans going forward for this particular team, they are looking to move me because they don't want me to walk away from the team without getting something in return. You know, I used to always kid the general managers when I walked into their office, because on the wall, they would have every single player's contract with the amount of money that he was making. So when they start thinking about trades, they were looking at the contracts to see if they were tradable first. Because if that didn't work, then you just simply weren't going to be able to make this trade. So I think the anxiety among the players are that, am I going to be moved at this point? Or am I valuable enough that they would figure that we could perhaps do a sign and trade after the trade deadline? That also becomes a strategy that would be employed by the agent. So from an agent and a player standpoint, you're sitting here, you should have all the potentials figured out. You know, one of the things that you clearly want to do when you're representing players is what I call role reversal, and sit on that other side and think about every possible outcome that could occur for your particular player, so that if in fact he plays out the season, becomes free, and the team decides not to re-sign him, where are you going? And what are your options at that point? Typically, you will not be a free agent and play out your contract unless there's no value for you on the trade market, because this is the time that those teams who have restricted free agents or unrestricted free agents are looking to move them, but only if they're going to get something valuable in return. The other factor is that the pandemic has probably reduced the salary cap for next year. And so one of the things that you have to be concerned about now as an agent is how long a contract will you sign, given the fact that we're looking at these potential losses. So it's going to be interesting to see what that free agent market looks like this year. because of the losses, but it also puts a little bit of squeeze on the teams as they look to get better for this run at the championship between now and the end of the season.
Is there any way from the agent and player perspective that you have seen that you can kind of steer at least the organization into one destination that you would rather go to when you have possible 8 different options on the board?
Well, again, it becomes part of your negotiation. The more teams you have an interest in your client, the better off you're going to be at this particular time. Because now they're thinking about a couple of things. One, if I retain him and I have room to retain him, I will. If I can, am I going to trade him to a rival and within my conference or within my division? Or am I looking to trade him to the Western Conference or the Eastern Conference? Yeah, there's some maneuvers that I think that can be made, but a lot of it is the play of your client. How well has he performed this year? Did he get through the season injury free? Does he look like he may be aging? Is he losing some of those skills? I mean, those are the factors that are going to make or break the trade or the potential extension of a contract or re-signing a player in his contract.
Now, you were the leader of the Player Association back in the 90s, and now we've seen so many star players kind of pushing their way onto different teams. But how would you say the growth in players' individual strength in moving and acquiring players has grown since your time around the league?
Well, I think you have to be a little careful with that because in a sense, the players who were the all-stars and who were able to negotiate, let's say, up to a third of their contract, I think it's increased a little since then. They do have some power, but you have to think about how long it takes to get there. You've got to go through a rookie wage scale. And if you're really, really good, you'll get extended. Then you have to decide whether or not you're going to turn down some of that extension money and actually become a free agent. So there's a path there that may take you a good 7 to 8 years before you can get to that point where you can make some of these very decisions that you're discussing. And so when you look at that pyramid of players, a handful of players reach that level. So to me, it sounds like I paid my dues, I've gone through the system, and I'm talented enough, and I have that much time left in my career that I can make some of those kinds of changes.
Now, when fans come to this time, it's more celebratory, as more like Christmas Day when you're getting new players to your team. But of course, we know that the NBA is a business, and for the players, what is this time like when you're talking about the future of moving your families and different friendships that you work with that have to rethink things through?
For an athlete coming into this game, it's a business, it's a game, it's a talent, but I often try to get them to think that your goal is to have a long career and to maximize your income. So what strategies are going to take to get there? I recall Tobias when he was with the Clippers, and the Clippers had offered him a lucrative extension. And once you turn down that extension, it's a good likelihood you'll be tradable bait at that time. Because I recall the offer at that time was an offer that I would consider tradable. It's a tradable number. So to get the players to understand, this is the mechanics of how this game works. It's a big number to you, but it's a tradable number to the team. And at the end of the day, if they get the makeup of the team that they were seeking, you become expendable, and then therefore they can trade you. So keep that in mind while you're deciding, but how much faith and confidence do you have in your own abilities? And if you continue to play as you are and become totally free, you're going to do better than that tradable number. And that's exactly what worked for Tobias. So for every twist that the fans are seeing right now, this is all part of a well-planned orchestrated negotiation from the standpoint of the player and his agent. Those are the best agents will do that. And I think you're seeing more of it because the salary cap has certain restraints, and you've got to be able to work within those constraints. But in order to do that, you've got to actually do what? You got to know that collective bargaining agreement, like it's inside and out, because that's what you offer the player. You offer him that thinking, that analysis to get him from point A to point B to point C.
Now, for you, this probably isn't the most hectic NBA trade deadline that you've ever gone through. You want to speak on more about that, kind of about what you went through in all of the different trade deadlines that you've seen?
Well, the trade deadlines, when you're sitting in there as a director of the union, it's really taking a holistic look to make sure the system works and that you don't have tampering and you don't have things like that. And you make sure that the agents are doing their jobs and making sure that they are working through the rules, so to speak. And as an individual agent, you're looking at as I said, every possible outcome that your talent. And the more players you have, obviously, the more difficult that becomes. So they're all active. When that time of the year comes, whatever seat you're in, you're going to get to know some players better than others, but you are concerned about them and their families and to make sure that everything works well for them.
Mm-hmm. And for this trade deadline, as you said, you're consultant for Tobias Harris and Kelly Oubre. These are both two players that have been on different sides of the league, and Tobias Harris probably a pinnacle with that 76ers team, but Kelly Oubre now becoming a journeyman in the league as he went from the Wizards to Phoenix to now Golden State, and being on the trade deadline on the bargain block once again. What are kind of the things that you say to your clients to either reassure them or get them through this time?
Well, Terrell Harris, who is his agent, I mean, what we typically talk about, again, is going through that. What is the potential outcome? What is that potential outcome? How many teams were interested in him when he was traded to Golden State? Their question becomes their limitations on the salary cap and how much room do they have, and will they consider signing him to an extension that would perhaps take him into the luxury tax threshold? Those are the things that they would be considering. If they choose to trade him, then we are certainly prepared that there are multiple teams who would have an interest in his skill level and at the same time, given his age. And we're hopeful that this next contract that he signs will be one of length that will stabilize his career going forward.
Now, when a player does get dealt, is it with that franchise, that connection just kind of severed from then on? Or is it just, hey, this is how things go, we have to get the money in the right situation?
Yeah, there are two ways you have to look at these trades. Like I always tell players that if someone's willing to trade for you, that means they want you. It doesn't mean that the team is necessarily trying to get rid of you, but there are teams that want you and are calling about you. That's a good thing. And that also puts you in the position of wherever you may go, that there's a good spot there for you.
Now, is there any other misconceptions that you think fans may have about the trade deadline, or things that you just want to air out at this time?
Well, I think the biggest thing about trades is that people don't think about. We talk about, and you hear everyone on TV and the radio talking, well, I'll trade this guy. I want to trade this guy. Well, that only works if somebody's willing to trade with you. Just because you want to trade somebody doesn't mean they're going to be traded, and or doesn't mean that you're going to get equal value in return. And so this particular time, where everybody's keeping an eye on those who are contenders, because they're looking to see how can we incrementally get better. And that may not be in the cards. It may not just be in the cards. So you may end up standing pat.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think the pandemic might play a role in this trade deadline opposed to other ones if we don't see?
Well, I think the biggest thing it has is always financial. It's what, given the loss, because we're still thinking about losses, how does that affect each individual team? And more importantly, how does that affect each individual team owner? So it's so individual with 30 teams and 30 different owners and what their outlook is. Now, you've got owners who are looking to minimize their tax situation. We'll spend up to the cap, but we don't necessarily want to go into the tax and the luxury tax, which is something I've always opposed, between the luxury tax and the rookie wage scale. Those are things I opposed originally, and are now looking to come back to say that they've been negatives for the players overall.
I think immediately for fans, we look towards the GM on who to blame or who to give credit to during these trades. But is there anyone else that fans might be missing on that?
No, I think the GM, listen, that's why he gets the big bucks. The GM gets the big bucks because he's going to make these deals. Now, some of them don't have the total authority without the approval of the owner. But I think most fans look at your general manager because he's the one that's there wheeling, dealing, making the moves at the last hour. As we speak, they're looking over everybody's contract, looking at the numbers, trying to look at the moves that will benefit them. But at the end of the day, most of them are not going to pull the trigger.
Well, that's all I have. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, I think it was a nice conversation. It's good to know that you are contemplating these trades and that you're such a loyal fan that you still wish that the Washington Wizards hadn't made some of the mistakes that they've made.
That's certainly for sure. And we'll see what these GMs can do on this Thursday.
All right. Well, it's good talking to you.
Thanks so much for joining me.
You're welcome.
From that incredible interview, we're going to be ending this special with talking about, the season ahead. We're going to be making some predictions. So first off, awards season. Who do you guys have for the various awards at the end of the season that they give out?
I think for me, a lot of this season, I was going with LeBron James for MVP, but we'll see how much that injury cuts into that. But there's been so many dominant players. I've been loving what Joel Embiid's been doing, so I'm going to give it to him for that one right there. For Rookie of the Year, it has to be LaMelo Ball. I don't care that he's not playing for the rest of the season. He's been the best rookie the entire year. Most improved player, you got to give it to the most improved team. Julius Randle, he's got to take that award home. And Sixth Man of the Year, I don't really know. Utah, Jordan Clarkson has been huge in what he's been able to do to lead that team. Been humongous. But Ronnie, what are you thinking?
So for me, I was with you on the MVP train. I thought LeBron was going to lead the Lakers, especially with AD out. I figured he'd be able to capitalize it. It's really sad the fact that he wasn't able to. Maybe we're starting to see a little bit of digression from King James, but hopefully that's not the case. Maybe when them two get back together, we might see a much greater LA Laker team. But for MVP right now, I think we're going to see the third straight year of a big man getting chosen. Obviously, it was back-to-back with Giannis, but this year, I think it's either going to be Jokic, Giannis, or Embiid. It's still Embiid's award to lose, in my opinion. I don't care if he's injured right now, but Jokic has been balling out all season, and Giannis is the Greek freak. They call him that for a reason. So, and then moving into Rookie of the Year, I'm going to give that to LaMelo Ball. I don't even care if he's injured either, Christian. I think he's been a human highlight reel, crazy passes, crazy shots, crazy dunks, too. And he's been able to stay away from the drama his dad brings. So I think that's a tremendous feat as well. Most improved player, I'm going to go with Julius Randle. I remember watching him play last year and just laughing at the fact that the Knicks gave that guy a max contract. Now that he's balling out the way he is, I think that's tremendous. He's definitely earned that contract. Sixth Man of the Year, I'm going alongside you. I'm picking Jordan Clarkson. That Utah Jazz team is stacked. Everyone is playing out. So for you to come off the bench and be a star, I think that's tremendous. So I think that's going to Jordan Clarkson. Defensive Player of the Year, I'm going to give that to either Rudy Gobert or Ben Simmons. Obviously, Rudy Gobert is always a front runner for it. And, I mean, he's a menace near the rim. Then you look at Ben Simmons, who is probably one of the best defensive guards in the league, probably is the best defensive guard in the league, and he's really willing Philadelphia in their playoff push. So either one of those two are probably going to be walking away with that award.
Generally agree with all of those picks. I will say, though, for Rookie of the Year, I think it's Halliburton or Edwards. I think the injuries are going to hurt LaMelo Ball, but for the most part, I agree with your guys' picks. Now, another thing I want to ask you guys is for the rest of the season and maybe into the playoffs, who is, a team or a player that you really like that you think is going to get hot and help their team out in the playoffs?
I mean, you got some huge teams back here trying to take on the Lakers and the Nets. But I really loved what Chicago did. I think Vucevic adds a whole new dynamic to play with Zach LaVine, and it's going to be very interesting. I don't know if they're a true contender or anything like that, but they're definitely going to be dangerous in the East playoff race.
Not to make a joke here, but I think the Miami Heat are really going to heat up in the latter half of the season. I mean, like I said, they had to battle back to get back into the playoff push, and now you add Victor Oladipo. I think that's a recipe for success. There is going to be a little bit of drop-off for the chemistry to work out, but once it does, that team is going to be very frightening for everyone else in the East.
And finally, the final question I have for you is the finals. Give me your Eastern Conference picks, your Western Conference picks for the finals, who's going to win off of that, your finals matchup, then who's coming away with the Larry O'Brien.
I think even though that there's been some great moves, we loved what Philadelphia was able to do, and you're saying the Heat's heating up. And last year, you already picked the Heat to go to the run. You have to check Ronnie's Twitter. He's very proud of that one. But I think the Nets, there's nothing to me that has been able to catch them. We still haven't even seen Kevin Durant, Kyrie, and James Harden all play at the same time. I think they still continue to cook. And Milwaukee would love to see them in the finals, but I'm still rolling with the Nets. And on the Western side, there's a lot of great teams. Denver, can they put it all together with Aaron Gordon? I don't know. And I think for me, I'm still going to go with the reigning champions, Lakers, Nets. I know it's not a hot take, but hey, listen, it's LeBron James. I'm not counting out LeBron James.
So for me, it's going to be the Nets and somebody in the Eastern Conference. Not like it's going to matter. Nets are going to go to the finals, no problem. For the West, though, I think it's wide open right now. I have no doubt that when LeBron and AD, however, once they get healthy and they get back, onto the court together, I don't think, it might take a while for the chemistry to get back there. And for all we know, maybe all the games they're going to lose without those two might hurt them once they get into the playoff and seeding-wise. But, I mean, hey, Utah is playing tremendously. Phoenix is playing tremendously. Don't forget the Clippers. I mean, that can be really scary for the Lakers, who might have to really grind their way out of the Western Conference just to make the finals. So I think it's going to be wide open, but it's not going to matter. I have the Nets winning the NBA Finals in 6 games. Put it against the Lakers, put it against the Clippers. It doesn't matter. Nets are winning this year.
Well, we have the picks on tape now, so we'll see if they come true. That is going to do it for this special. Some people I want to thank. First off, my lovely panelists for talking the NBA with me. I do want to thank Dr. Grantham for that wonderful interview. I do want to thank you all for watching at home. And that is all we have here for this Hall Pro special. Until next time, stay safe and stay happy.